In a political landscape where culture was increasingly becoming the main political issue, coupled with fear-mongering and misinformation, one Roman emperor/empress and our interpretation of them has become the subject of examination yet again. A historical figure whose transsexuality has been subject of debate in recent times. A figure that stood on top of the world but hated every minute of it. This is the story of Rome's most controversial emperor and one of the most infamous LGBT people in history, Elagabalus and his downfall. Elagabalus was of noble origin, being born in 204 into a prominent Syrian family in Emesa under the name Textus Varius Avitus Bassianus, but her reign would be anything but noble. Amongst Romans, Syria and the East in general is stereotyped as being weak and effeminate. This might be an argument for some stories of Elagabalus' supposed transness or gender fluidity being fabricated. However, instead of allowing discussion on the topic, I will call anyone that disagrees with me either a woke revisionist snowflake trying to chop everyone's dick off or a bigot erasing trans history, even though all our sources on Elagabalus were made by the opponents or long after her death. For engagement-based reasons and because I personally fuck with the idea of the gender-fluid Roman emperor, I will alternate between different pronouns. Now, Elagabalus was born into a cult, an experience that would change the rest of her life. From early on, he took his faith very seriously because he was no ordinary believer. No, he was even as a child apprised of this cult. You know what we call that? Child labor. Now, what did this religion look like? The primary deity in Emesa was the sun god Elagabalus. It turns out that our controversial emperor was posthumously nicknamed Elagabalus after the god. To avoid confusion, I will call the god Elagabal. Her Elagabalus fundamentalist beliefs would be an important pillar throughout the life of Elagabalus. This cult later spread all the way to the Netherlands, and Elagabal would morph into Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, the last important pagan religion in Rome before Christianity took off. But I will now make a break in that narrative to talk about it later to hopefully blueball you into staying until the end. Now, how a cultist teen became emperor of the most powerful empire in the world is an odd story, an incestuous story. Elagabalus was a member of the Severan dynasty, just like a certain emperor Caracalla. This emperor was overthrown and murdered by one of his underlings, Macrinus, April 217. Caracalla's aunt, Julia Maesa, did not accept the dynasty ending like that, but Caracalla had no legitimate children, so she claimed that Elagabalus' true father was actually Caracalla, who stabbed with his first cousin, Julius Somaeus. I will simply accept this as the truth without further questioning it and present it as such. History consists of fact, not analysis and interpretation based on the often unreliable information we have. However, while claiming that I only present the fact, I will also bring in my personal modern biases with no regard for contemporary standards. Julia Maesa was a powerful noblewoman and successfully led a rebellion against Macrinus, who was defeated at the Battle of Antioch on June 8, 218. Thus, the infamous Elagabalus became the emperor of Rome at age 14. This is where the scandals begin and Elagabalus finally deteriorated. This is finally the story of history's most infamous bisexual. We do not have many sources on Elagabalus' foreign policy and economic policies and stuff like that. Therefore, we can conclude that their reign was solely based around religion and scandals, rather than admitting that we simply do not have the sources to do a fair analysis of Elagabalus' reign. I could mention how Roman historians at the time had a huge crush on Marcus Aurelius and the Nerva Antonine dynasty while having a hate boner for anyone not part of this dynasty. However, this would go against my narrative of Elagabalus' reign being one of sexual debauchery and degeneracy. My job as a video essayist is not to be fair. It is to slander people and make assumptions while presenting my own narrative as simply the facts. On a serious note, there are a lot of good video essays, but personal drama and the downfall of X-person will always be shit shows with lots of different competing narratives and facts. Now back to Elagabalus. His religious policy caused uproar among many pious Romans, because he put his role as chief priest of the sun god above his role as emperor and Pontifex Maximus. The Pontifex Maximus was the chief priest of Roman religion, but Elagabalus preferred her sun worship, putting Elagabalus above Jupiter as chief deity. Perhaps to the Romans in the West, it seemed like an Easterner imposing his beliefs on the West, which reminds us of insert anti-immigrant Islamophobic rhetoric. He also used up a lot of Rome's money to build the lavish Elagabalium temple, dedicated to Elagabal, including a holy black stone representing the deity, moving it from Emesa to Rome. Her dedication to her faith might actually be part of where the trans accusations stem from. Elagabalus probably wanted to have children, however for priests in the East castration was common. So perhaps Elagabalus reportedly seeking sex reassignment surgery according to contemporary historian Cassius Dio was actually a long game of telephone that started out as an intention to be castrated or a misunderstanding, others made up slander. Additionally, his Eastern garments made of silk were seen as feminine in Rome. You could call him a femboy in that sense if you believe he was cis. He also shaved a lot and wore makeup, perhaps even more than Roman women at the time. His mannerisms supposedly were also quite feminine. Mind you, this all comes from sourced by these somewhat xenophobic Roman historians who really didn't like Elagabalus and how different his Syrian culture was from Roman culture. On the flip side, he reportedly married a man and wanted to be called wife. All irony aside, Elagabalus might have been what we would call trans or even genderfluid. However, sources are clearly biased against Elagabalus personally and thought that Eastern cultures were overly feminine. So, unless someone invents a time machine and asks Elagabalus personally, it is impossible to say whether they would want us to call them a woman or man or maybe both at different times. What is clear is that Elagabalus was seen as very feminine for Roman standards, at least according to 3 contemporary accounts all hostile to Elagabalus. I guess if there were cis instead of transfeminine or genderfluid, he might have been a Roman fanboy, so I didn't use complete clickbait. Or too much reflection for a video essay about a person, my bad. His sex life was total debauchery, going against all Roman norms. Perhaps he wasn't right and we had a needed therapy. If only he had this video sponsor, Better Scam. Better Scam allows you to connect to unqualified people that aren't licensed therapists, which might make your problems even worse. Use my code to get 10% off, while I and Better Scam profit from your mental health issues while being severely overcharged. Back to the video. We have discussed Elagabalus' rise to power, his controversial religious policies, and a struggle with xenophobia and the gender roles of the time. But Elagabalus was a mere teen, a very horny teen. Their sex life too was riddled with controversy and broke all Roman values. It's truly a tale of debauchery, degeneracy, and other highly negative words that are frequently used in certain circles that may blame the fall of Rome entirely on decadence, and think the West will also fall if we don't drive trans people into suicide. Anyway, most of these stories are from the highly objective and very contemporary Historia Augusta. Oh wait, I'm not meant to prove my claims. Take them with a sip of water, for they are very reliable indeed. I mean, it literally begins with the life of Elagabalus Antoninus, also called Varius. I should never have put in writing, hoping that it might not be known that he was emperor of the Romans. How could that not be neutral? It starts out by calling Elagabalus' mother a harlot, so clearly lewdness is hereditary. As the video essays, I agree with this assessment, for it helps my one-sided narrative about Elagabalus being awful and over 1,500 years due cancelling. The first non-religious scandal was supposedly the creation of a women's senate, where they supposedly decide important matters like who can wear what jewelry. Then Elagabalus is called a bottom. Actually, this implied that all his souls were filled. In ancient Rome, it didn't matter who you fucked, just whether you are the one fucking or the one being fucked. So this is of course a huge scandal. True degeneracy. To make it worse, he reportedly, and I quote, sent out agents to search for those who had particularly large organs and bring them to the palace in order that he might enjoy their vigor. Truly awful behavior. Of course you can't reject the emperor, so someone like me would have had to go to the palace against his will. Reportedly, he also used to have the story of Venus painted in his house, and he himself would take the role of Venus and suddenly drop his clothing to the ground and fall naked on his knees, one hand on his breast, the other before his private parts, his buttocks projecting meanwhile thrust back in front of his partner in depravity. I just want to mention, it says this in an official Roman source. Here's the Latin text. But the worst thing he did, he fucked the entirety of the Roman Empire by having sex with and marrying one of the Vestal virgins, Aquila Severa, in early 221 after divorcing his first wife Paula. Now the Vestal virgins were key to Roman religion. They were the priestesses of Vesta, the virgin goddess of the hearth, basically the domestic fire, home and family. So yeah, super important, a key guardian of the Roman people. So the virginity of the Vestal virgins maintaining her fire was seen as essential to the survival of the Roman Empire itself. By taking the virginity of one of them, Elagabalus fucked the entire empire. Both him and the no longer virgin priestess of Vestal should have been executed. He actually later divorced her under the pressure, and then after another marriage took her again as his wife after only a few months. So she was both wife number 2 and number 4. Going back to harlots, Elagabalus gathered all the harlots in Rome and gave them speeches calling them comrades, just like a woman, and then you know what happened. Elagabalus asked them to recommend him to others. Remember to take all of this as facts and not question it. Another story says that Elagabalus bought one of the most expensive prostitutes in Rome, just to not sleep with her. He also invented certain new kinds of vice, even going beyond the perverts used by the debauchees of old. And he was well acquainted with all the arrangements of Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero. Dang girl, taking inspiration from some of the most good Roman emperors to go even further is truly based. I mean, absolutely degenerate behavior. Some of these accusations are really funny, due to being so absurd, especially the non-sex related ones. He got himself up as a confectioner, a perfumer, a cook, a shopkeeper, or a procurer, and he even practiced all these occupations in his own house continually. God forbid an emperor's hobbies. Then, sometimes he laughed so loud in the theater that no one else could be heard by the audience. How do you even come up with this? She also supposedly fed her dogs foie gras and generally treated her pets, including luxurious ones, extravagantly. Even funnier is the accusation that the fish that he ate were cooked in a bluish sauce that preserved their natural color, as though they were still in the seawater. I mean, come on, what's wrong with that? There are a lot of accusations about race and extravagance. I do not think I need to name them all. Oh right, I meant to be biased against Elagabalus. The transgender, woke, liberal man has sought out human sacrifices, specifically children from noble birth all over Italy. This is true, I was one of the children. He was also corrupt, selling senatorial positions. There are a lot more accusations. The Historia Augusta might be long, but the parts about Elagabalus are a pretty quick read. The version I used will be linked in the description. I recommend giving it a read, because this is top tier level hatred and slander. Truly beautiful. But try not to take it with a grain of salt, you will die from salt poisoning. Oh yeah, poisoning. How does this tale end? Elagabalus adopted an heir, their cousin Severus Alexander, but they tried on various occasions to dispose of Severus Alexander. Elagabalus' grandmother sensed that public support for Elagabalus and his mother were waning, so she decided to get rid of the two. She had another daughter, Julia Mamaea, the mother of Severus Alexander. Besides, Elagabalus seemed to be losing authority. Allegedly, Elagabalus went to the Praetorian Guard with her mother and cousin expecting the Praetorian Guard to support her, but they supported Severus Alexander. This enraged Elagabalus, who wanted many executed, allegedly at least. But yeah, no, that of course didn't happen. Instead, Elagabalus and their mother were killed. This happened around 13 March 222. Severus Alexander became the new Roman emperor. He would reign for 13 years until being killed in Germania in 235, which would cause the crisis of the 3rd century. I made a video about it, but specifically Aurelian struggled to keep Rome together rather than the entire crisis. From Elagabalus' story we can learn several things. 1. Always trust all sources and media without questioning them. Critical thinking is not necessary. 2. Degeneracy leads to the fall of empires. Respecting someone's pronouns is basically the same as 109/11. 3. Never eat fish with a blue sauce. That's an insult to Neptune. 4. Don't get professional help. Get better scam. And lastly, 5. Horny teenagers make the most fun rulers. Okay, that was the video essay. Now I react over the process of making this video by showing my non-existent patrons on screen. To make this video, I opened LibreOffice and wrote a script based on information I found. This video consists of words which are made of syllables and form sentences. Audience retention dying. Check out my series on every time the Roman Empire nearly fell. It's far from finished yet though. See ya all in the next one.